Hey crafters, welcome to Paulette's Pretty Paper Crafts. It is October 11, 2015, and I am playing in Kathy Racusin's 30-Day Color Challenge. I'm also going to combine this with a Verve challenge. I haven't played in Verve, but they've got these really cute pumpkins, which I don't have. The inspiration photo is black, white, and glam. I do have these little Verve apple dies and the matching stamps, but we're not going to use the stamps. We're going to draw on these apples and make them mimic the pumpkin stamps. I'm also going to use this star strip die from Lawn Fawn Stitch Journaling card set because the little Verve pumpkins have that star at the top instead of a leaf. I've also got this W+9 Holiday Apertures rectangle die, and I simply cut a rectangle of black cardstock, laid that in the die cutting machine and cut it, and then trimmed those little legs to mimic the black table in the inspiration photo. I'm also going to use this $1 stamp that I pulled out of the $1 bin at Michael's, which is the little Candelabra. And I've cut my apples in some heavyweight white cardstock by the Paper Studio. And doing my coloring here. These are also some ProvoCraft or Cuttlebug dies. This is a little Rose Wreath die, and I've got one embossed and one flat, both cut in Canson Water Color Paper. I'm going to draw the lines on my pumpkins, and the large pumpkin has 4 lines, and the small pumpkin has 3 lines of black. And actually, these are the cardstock pumpkins. I cut them in watercolor and cardstock so I could glue them together for double thickness because I'm going to be elevating them. And I colored these all up and then realized that they weren't the watercolor paper. But, you know, it was a good practice run to see if I could mimic the lines on the Verve pumpkins. So that's okay. That happens when you're creating. So I'm pulling in the watercolor paper here, but I've got to trim these leaves off. And I'm just taking my little mini scissors and trim those up. I love to do this and get double duty out of my die and stamp products. It just stretches my investment and allows me to be a bit more creative than I normally would with just the regular set, the way it comes. So I'm all done coloring my pumpkins, and I'm just going to lay those aside. And I'm going to color the back wreath, the flat one. My initial idea was just to color the outer edge and the inner edge, but then when I laid them together, too much of the white was showing. Ultimately, I ended up filling the whole wreath in with gray, which, you know, I could have just cut a piece in the gray cardstock, but that's okay. It worked out all right. Even black cardstock would have been perfect right here. But that's all right. This gray is what I had in mind, and this is the C4 Copic marker. Okay, you know I've got a bunch of these wreaths already colored up and just in like red roses and green leaves, but I can't use them on this project, so I'm going to go ahead and stay with the inspiration piece and do just some black and some grays, and I think it'll be fun. That's what I love about these challenges, is that they make me step outside my comfort zone and do something non-traditional, because I'm very traditional. So I ended up choosing this C4 Cool Gray for the roses, and nothing fancy, just filling them in. And then I will do the leaves and the scrolly bits in the black. This is a birthday card for my daughter Katie, and it is so late. Her birthday was near the end of September, and I ended up doing a wonderful chalk paint finish on a display cabinet, and I will be sharing that shortly. I want to wait and share it when it's all assembled, and you can just have the glory of the assembled pieces. And I'll do a photo montage and then a voiceover for that. So I'm just filling in the scrolly bits and the leaves with this black Bic. I don't have the black Copic yet, but it's on back order. And I just really think this is it's a fun color combination. It's something I would not typically do. So just finishing up. And I really like how this has turned out. I think it's going to be cute layered onto the back piece. Now I've got this gray cardstock base that I've created that was, gosh, probably some Recollections 65-pound weight, which I'm really not using these days, but I still have it, so I'm going to use it. It kind of had a deckled edge on one side, and so I let that be the front of the card, since this is kind of a Halloween feeling card. And I'm going to glue my little table down with some Glossy Accents. Now this whole card was probably a cheat because I really mimicked the inspiration photo, and I kind of hate that when other people do it. But I was like, oh, this is a perfect idea for my apples. So what are you going to do? So I've got this $1 stamp from the Michael's $1 bin, and I can't read that, but maybe you could. This actually was purchased this season. Those $1 stamps just get me every time. If there's nobody in line, I can resist them. So I'm going to ink this in some Ranger Archival Jet Black ink and just eyeball it from the bottom because I can see where that red rubber was, and got it to sit on my table pretty good. And I'm just going to try, see how my wreath is going to look here. I think I want some dimensional foam adhesive and elevate it just a little bit. Some Scotch 3M tape, and boy, I always stick it to my finger, and that's the wrong thing to do because then it does not adhere well to your card base, or the pieces don't adhere well together, or sometimes they kind of fall apart later. But I really like the dimension that this gives, so try not to touch the tape. And then I'm just going to alternate these two pieces and then glue it down with some Glossy Accents. And use my tweezers. The tweezers just really help with placement because your fingers aren't in the way. You can really see where you're placing your items. And then I've got to glue my pumpkin layers together. I ultimately glued the white cardstock behind the watercolor pieces, and then I realized that these Verve pumpkins have a black stem, so I've colored in the black stems. I did ultimately color the outside edges of the pumpkins with my black marker too, because I didn't get them lined up just perfectly, so I had those little snippets of white peeking out the edges, so I just ended up going around the whole thing, and if I had the Verve stamps, they would have a black outline anyway, so that worked out just fine. And then just playing around and seeing for placement, and I probably should have done 2 pumpkins in the wreath or 2 on the table. I think I changed my mind here near the end. I'm going to color these little stars, and they're just easier. These tiny pieces are easier to color if you lay them back in the negative space of the die. They just hold the piece in place while you color it. I don't really like to waste ink, but for itty bitty pieces, and again, this is something I could have die cut in the gray cardstock and absolutely eliminated this step, but sometimes when you're creating, you don't see ahead. So I've got some hemp. I decided that my pumpkins needed something vine-like. They're not flourishy or curly like the vines on the Verve stamp, but I think they'll be okay. So I just cut a little piece for each pumpkin and then colored it with the C4 Copic marker because it was so wrong in its natural color. And just going to glue those down with some Glossy Accents. And then lay the star right on top of that. And I think these turned out pretty cute. I really was very pleased with them. So just pressing the stars down into that glop of Glossy Accents. I've got some really chunky silver glitter. Ultimately, I was thinking I would put it on these roses, and then as I was getting my glue on here, I was like, oh, you know what? That's going to completely cover up my roses. So I ended up using just some very fine, that kind of iridescent glitter. You know, I buy the inexpensive glitters, the Recollection glitters, and just dump them all into my Tupper type bowl there. And then I decided the candle tips needed that. I struggled. Should they be gold? Should have I added yellow or orange to them? And I just ended up using this same white iridescent glitter. And it's okay. I don't know that I was really thrilled with that at the end, but it's okay. And then I decided my Candelabra wasn't fancy enough, so I'm going to add that silver chunky glitter all along the tabletop and then on the chunky parts of the Candelabra. And this is my glam, my glam for the Verve challenge. My coloring was so simple, so I don't know if that really... Did I really qualify for Kathy's, you know, just color something today? Technically it was coloring though, even though it was very simple. So just dumping on this really chunky glitter. This glitter is probably 20 years old. It doesn't matter. No. Collect it and you'll ultimately use it, right? Yes. It needs just a little bit more right here in the center. Pretty fun. I don't use much glitter on my projects because it just gets on everything. But I tell you, the coffee filters are the way to go to wrangle it back into the containers. So yay, Jennifer McGuire, for sharing that tip on her blog. So after I had the glitter on the table, I ended up deciding that one pumpkin inside the wreath and one on the table. And I'm just going to glue this large pumpkin in the wreath down with the Glossy Accents. And I think this one needs some foam adhesive just because the well, it's not glass glitter, it's very chunky glitter. And I'm just going to elevate that a little bit, and I decided that that was enough. All right, I ended up using this happy birthday sentiment set from Close to My Heart. It's a retired set, and I ended up using this pretty sentiment, which is the same sentiment I used on John's card, but I guess it doesn't matter. They'll never know. And stamping that in some Ranger Archival Jet Black ink, and we're done. So there's my Bling black and white. Thanks for joining me.